Alright. Asiam Nasiaya, Thikum Gunam Sap, Haitabka, me to Ametstam to Snawayeth Laylam to Nawayil. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful morning and afternoon gathering and sharing your thoughts about all the discussions we had today. In my language, I just welcomed you back. Ask for your attention again. It's very important that we connect and have these conversations. And I also thank you for sitting in this house of teachings today, Snowayeth Laylam, which is also the name of Langara College. I'd like to welcome back our facilitators, Roop, Aslam, and Jocelyn, to be sharing about all the graphic recording that was taken from our sessions today. All right, hi Tepka, and me Tep, come on.
Thank you. Thanks, Christy.
Hi, everyone. Whew, what a day. What a day. What a great day. Kim, could we have the next slide, please? So we just wanted, for the sake of those that couldn't be in 3 places at one time, do a quick recap of the fantastic conversations that took place in our breakout sessions today. So we're going to do this in a way that has you really looking at and getting to experience the full glory of the graphic recording that took place in our sessions. So I'm going to kick us off and just think a little bit about what our session was like around granting this morning. So the session was Advancing Reconciliation, Equity, and Accessibility in Granting. We had panelists from the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, San Francisco, the City of Seattle, and the Calgary Arts Development. And they generously shared with us some of the incredible ways that they are working to advance accessibility, equity, and reconciliation in how they do grants. So this has captured some real beauty of our conversation. We heard about the Arts Council Equity Framework, the commitment to the Equity Framework in the City of Toronto, the Cultural Endowment Fund in San Francisco. We heard actually also about Cultural Ambassador Program in San Francisco with granting. Calgary talking about inclusive design, nothing about us without us, looking at a one-size-fits-one approach to granting, looking for ways to be involved in virtuous cycles in the design process of the granting opportunities. Lots more from Calgary. We heard from Ontario, wonderful opportunity to take a look at their strategic plan. It all lives online. A lot of their equity framework is embedded right there. We heard from also from Ontario, bringing Indigenous, newcomer, refugee visibility to the programs and the accessibility of the grants with the Ontario Arts Council. And then we heard from Seattle, and really Kathy from Seattle reminded us that it's really about our core values, and I think that this comment goes for our granting institutions as well as the way that we run any of our institutions. But how do we locate accessibility in the context of our own core values? How do we locate equity? How do we locate redress and reconciliation in how we show up every day? And in that way, that will begin to inform our policy. That will begin to enable us interrelational opportunities for building programs together. A really wonderful session about advancing reconciliation, equity, and accessibility in granting. Kim, could we see the next slide, please? Roop, take it away.
Here we are. We had a wonderful panel this morning. For the pleasure of your company, Joy and Resilience in Community Engaged Practice. We had an amazing group of panelists, some folks that had worked in community engaged arts for close to 40 years, some folks that were, relatively new to it in the last 5 to 6 years. And it was a lot of learning happened in the session. Let's see here. So a lot of challenges actually came up as to like how we do this work in a good way. And I think one of the things that happened that really came out from everybody was that we will make mistakes in trying to advance good work within community and trying to reach out and be inclusive of the communities that we work with, that there's some stumbling that happens there. But once we're able to stumble, fall, and pick ourselves up, that work can keep on advancing. Or it needs to sometimes slow down and just have that breathing room to be able to exist. Let's see here. You know, a lot of it was about the core intentions of where the community engaged practices come from. Coming from a place of love and respect was really emphasized. And then some folks wrote some words which I forgot in a bin, so you're not going to hear them right now. And let's go on to the next slide. Thanks, Kim.
Next slide, please. Thanks. So I had the conversation downstairs about sharing administrative and space services. So a conversation that's like very new to me as someone who doesn't do a lot of like arts administration work, but to be able to hear from each of our panelists who have a lot of experience in thinking about how to make arts organizations sustainable in the long term. And some of these methods being sharing as administrative services in particular, but also space services. So our panelists were David Pei, Claire Sakaki, and Julie Mamia. I believe that's how you pronounce her name, and moderated by Christina Lemieux. And David and Claire shared a really interesting conversation because the two of them have worked together on a shared building project, and they had a conversation about what all of the things that happened before they got the keys and then all of the things that they had to do after they got the keys. So a very interesting learning experience in the way that they talked through what it was like from each of their perspectives, what they learned, what were some of the very core things to get in place before they began their journey, and then some of the learnings that took place as they went on. And I think there's similar reflection that mistakes will be made, that things have to slow down sometimes in order to speed up. But then also some of the learnings from the reflection was like, well, which organizations have that capacity to engage in these like bigger collaborative capacity building projects? And where does the knowledge lie on how to engage in these collaborative projects? And a few people noticed that like there were a couple of key knowledge holders within the community who, if you just like picked up the phone and spoke to them, they'd be able to tell you so many things that would be of value in terms of HR, in terms of legal things. Yet the ability to access those people felt quite limited. Christina, however, has set up a Google document where people can ask for things that they would like to share and receive and also offer things that they have the ability to share. And with that Google document, she would also add a lot of the resources that are available online. So quite often we'll say, oh, it would be amazing if we knew X, Y, and Z. Well, that's already available online, but sometimes we just don't know where to find it. So the link for that we can send out afterwards, but it's bit.ly/YVR shared spaces. I think that's about all that I wanted to mention, besides for the fact that in the group discussion, we spoke about some of the barriers, as well as some of the bridges that can be built to create platforms for sharing. And a lot of those were noted down individually, so as we process that, we'll feed them back into the engagement summary that you'll all be receiving. Thanks.
Thanks, Aslam. Kim, could we have the next slide, please? Roop, it's all you, buddy.
Back again. So we had a great conversation upstairs around equity and learning journeys. We had some incredible local panelists discussing their organizational journeys with equity and how that's sometimes not possible to separate from the internal journey of equity as well. We're looking at kind of best organizational practices. A lot that was shared was, in and around bringing the staff and the board all together with a common mission of equity. And one of the interesting questions kind of raised that really resonated with me was, how diversity and inclusion can sound like assimilation, which I thought was a resonant thing in the room, and how when we're addressing language, like Kelsilam had mentioned earlier with terms like reconciliation, and how those can feel like those terms are outdated or passed by. What are maybe some new terms that could help identify this work and the meaningful work that wants to happen? How some boards really struggled with the idea of using the term anti-oppression because it felt too aggressive, and what is it to dismantle systems of oppression, and how we can bring that work and make that work approachable by our organizations. Yeah, it was a fantastic panel, and then we had some great comments from folks that were participating in it as well, and I think I'll leave it right about there.
Thanks, Roop. Kim, can we see the next slide? Fantastic relationships. So beyond accessibility and accommodation checklists, we were so fortunate to actually have an opportunity to slow down a little bit together and really be together in a good way and find a way to share space across different modes of communication, really make space to understand one another, understand across different ways of experiencing the world. We talked a lot about how do we move beyond the checklist. We did have a conversation about the checklist, and we heard from our panelists that the checklist is sort of the basic, the sort of bottom floor, if you will, the sort of the first step to ensuring that we're trying to cover bases, but it's not in and of itself an adequate way to approach making our institutions, our teams, our art accessible or inclusive. We talked about the deep necessity and how things can be so glorious when we can center relationships, when we can center the experiences of and the expertise of folks, artists who are disabled, of deaf artists, when we're trying to do things like, make a performance accessible for deaf attendees, working with deaf attendees and deaf artists to make the art, to develop the programs, working to do our homework and to understand how to show up for and in solidarity with artists with disabilities, deaf artists, and thereby engaging folks at the very beginning of processes of development so that it's co-creative. We also heard about how even the most magnificent opportunities for inclusion can be, blown away in an instant by very small missteps or errors. So it's a fragile time. Even when we're able to get it right, it can be quite fragile. So it's attending to that and attending to one another in relationship that really allows us to create institutions, to create art, to create a community that can be accessed and by everyone. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thanks. And we'll see the next slide, Kim.
And this was the afternoon session that took place over here, Securing Local Arts and Culture Spaces. As I'm sure many of you are well aware, the issue of space within the city is quite contentious. Affordable space being something that people are talking about in terms of housing, in terms of art spaces, no different. The panelists that we had joining us, Diane Blunt spoke about the idea and the work that she's doing towards an Indigenous arts and culture space that really serves professional Indigenous artists. Stephanie Allen spoke about the work that she's doing in Hogan's Alley around creating community land trusts. And then Moi Eng joined us from San Francisco, and she told us about the work that she does with the Community Arts Stabilization Trust. The work that Moi presented, I think, inspired a lot of thought amongst people in the room, as well as amongst the other panelists, because it spoke particularly around how very strategic, very careful investment can work alongside NGOs can work alongside other sectors to ensure long-term sustainable space. So under market value, but in a way that is able to secure long-term ownership by arts organizations. And then the last panelist, Brian, reflected on some of what the other panelists spoke about and really contextualized Moy's work for Vancouver, and speaking again about who's able to access that space. On the whole, I think a lot of the things that were spoken about were things that a lot of people might be familiar with, like the need for space, but then getting into the how of it, we often run into a lot of like mysterious processes. And it takes a lot of capital, like social, political, and economic capital in order to access or gain entry into secure space. And this is the real challenge that was thrown back to the city that says, okay, how do we work together in order to secure the long-term sustainability of affordable space within the city? Especially as it's one of the most exciting places for people to live, not only in Canada, but as an international destination as well. But also not isolating Vancouver as the only city that's facing this issue, but also comparison being made to Tokyo, to San Francisco, to London, to New York, many other cities in the world facing similar issues as well. Thanks.
So those were our breakout sessions, and I want to just take a quick moment to offer, and I invite my amazing co-conspirators to do the same. Just one quick reflection that I have noticed that's really lit up my heart in terms of a theme that I saw present in a lot of the conversations today, and that's the theme of making mistakes. Making mistakes. So we're talking about radically shifting how we think about money, how we think about relationships, how we think about community, how we think about centering voices that have not been at the center. And the idea that mistakes are going to be made and that we collectively have the capacity to attend to those, to be accountable to those, to get feedback around mistakes, and then to pick up and keep going. So for me, that is a really magical, important thread that I heard through the day. Rube?
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to say is that any of these individual sessions could have been full day to 2-day sessions in and amongst themselves and really being able to dive into them. But one of the through lines that I consistently heard was values. And coming from a values base, whether that's as individuals or organizations, but how do we, and the question being, how do we move forward with those values, and how do we center our organizations based on those values of equity, reconciliation, and inclusion?
Yeah, and I think just some closing reflections from me on the day is the fact that a lot of what's being faced by individuals are being faced at a systemic level. So when we think about securing local arts and culture spaces, I think about like how long it took for us to figure out like what space can we use to host this dialogue. When we think about creating, relationships over accommodation checklists, like that's something that we as a team and as a city, we were grappling with in the process of trying to put together today. And as we said, like mistakes will be made, but we're trying to show like this is one way to do it, and this is how we're learning and trying to move forward as an entire sector and industry, and hopefully share those learnings openly, honestly, so that we can all take benefit from those.
Thanks, Aslam.
In the idea of spending a day of talking about art, we also wanted to make sure that we had some artist respondents. And I'm so happy to introduce you all to an artist that I've admired for years, has been lifting and working in community and doing incredible art and bringing a powerful voice to Vancouver. Would you all please welcome Kim Mortal?
Hey everybody. Awesome. So it was my job to basically hop around and actively listen and write whatever I wanted. And so I did my best in writing a poem. Magandang early hapon, or late hapon, magandang early gabi. Basically, I said, good early evening, Good late afternoon. My name is Kim Villaganti. I also go by my artist name, Kim Mortal. I am a queer Filipinx diasporic individual on unceded, unsurrendered Coast Salish land. I learned today that it's the right thing to do to acknowledge this land as Skohomish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I never knew that. And I think it really just reflects the process of decolonizing and how it's an ongoing journey. And I'm learning with everyone here. And collectively that's happening. And it's really encouraging to see everyone learning at the same time. It's kind of rare. As an artist, I like my alone time. So I'm not gonna lie, I was uncomfortable many times throughout the day. But I'm really grateful for this space and for what is gonna happen in this city. I'm very curious. Who's ready for a poem? Woo, nice. I didn't expect that. So I work with this awesome MC named Oz12. He's an Indigenous MC, artist, organizer, and youth facilitator. Sounds like some people know him. And he talks about reconciliation through the new flip of that word reconciliation. And together, non-Indigenous and Indigenous artists, we go into high schools and elementaries, and we talk about heavy subjects such as, like, what do we do as the future? And so we reimagine redesigning the future with youth. And so through poetry, rap, and visual art, we are brainstorming together. And so a lot of my poetry, I owe it to the ancient knowledge of the people of this land. And a lot of poetry I do is to activate. So I'm gonna make you guys do stuff with your body, even though you're seated. Are you guys up for that? Okay, not as enthusiastic. Okay. Okay. Roop did this in one of the breakout sessions. I want you to find your pulse with your finger. Finding your pulse with your finger. Find your pulse with your finger. We are in this together. What's it mean to be a good neighbor? Making mistakes when we draw a picture. Self-definition, a messy masterpiece, unfinished. The function of an eraser. The erasure. The catalyst are the remnants of what once was and what is. Disrupt selective memory. Indigenous people, Black people, racialized people, queer, trans, and folks with disability. Tectonic plates shifting us back in, pulling us back to the center. Do you feel the urgency in your body? The need to go in? Perhaps a twitch in your foot, beyond space like square footage. Standing on blankets, patterns of equitable mathematics. Take your hand, your right hand. Now go like this. Keep doing that. Take your hand, go like this. Funds and resources, hand them over to those disadvantaged. Pass the map, pass the mic. You've been talking far too long. Let them hold that policy-making pen. What will the city do with this letter we are writing? What happens after all of this dialoguing? Now put your hand over your heart. Say this with me. We will do better. We will do better. We will do better. Directors, administrators, city planners, hi. Artists, refugees, immigrants, settlers, hello. What privileges do you use? What resources can you give up? Action not from your fear, not from your fragility, but from responsibility. A parking lot, a condo, a building demolished, new coffee shop where artists make office, a burnt out type of love. It's complicated. Using money out of pocket. We do it for the culture, but we could do more. New generation needs us to open doors. Hand over your heart. Say it with me. We will do better. We will do better. We will do better. We are birthing our projects on a land that is not our own. Take a walk through a park. This was once a home. Reach beyond your verbal acknowledgments. Growing gardens that flourish. A process, not a race. The end is a new start. Put your hand over your heart. Make a braver space. Move through your mistakes. Be tender. Be queer. Actively listen to those who are still here. She said, this land is ancient, not merely adornment. Said the role of the artist is to connect us back to the spirit. Reflect the patience of weavers in building relationships. Visions planted by Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish. Hand over heart. I will do better. I will do better. I am gonna do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim Mortal. Christy Lee Charles, will you come up to the stage and bless it one more time? A little bit more portable.
What's that?
Just a little.
All right. All right. Hejka. Hejtsapka. So I just wanted to thank everybody for being here. I'm going to sit down because I'm old and I've been here since 8 o'clock this morning. So when I was asked to be a part of this today, I was asked to be a part of the morning, check off the protocol list, right? And I stayed and I got to do this artist response with Kim as well. Thank you for your words. But then I was asked if I wanted to stay till the evening. And I said, well, of course, I have to stay. We opened up this work that we're doing together on this land, and this is my people's ancient land. I know we heard about it at the beginning of this talk, but to give you an idea of the ancient connection that we have to this land, I'm related to every single one of these speakers that were here on the stage this morning. And you've probably heard me say this before, but I'm always going to say it again. Because even though I got to sit here and we got to be a part of this, at the end of the day, we didn't go over the MST graphic. I talked about it this morning and it was out in the hallway, but was it shown up here with the reflection? When we sat in these groups, we talked about Indigenous communities and Indigenous representation, but we still didn't acknowledge Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh specifically. You guys hold rights to your power as people of color, immigrants, refugees, travelers across the land, visitors coming to speak. But yet at the end of the day, I sit here and I go, if I didn't stay here, how would we still be seeing throughout the day? My ancestral connection to where we are today goes back 10,000 years. My great-great-grandfather was Huelsimuch. He is the first documented citizen of the city of Vancouver. It is my absolute honor to sit here and to share our teachings with everyone. But it also kind of hurts a little bit because I'm like, as great as this is, I still have to sit back and say, we got to share more. Got to keep sharing because like at the beginning of this conversation when Kaysalem and Deborah and Auntie Carlene were speaking, this is just the first part. And this is just what we're sharing with you. And I wanted to say that it really means a lot to me, as much as it does to you and the communities that you represent. But it means so much to me because now, at the end of this day, I get to go home to my children, my 3 children, and share with them what I did today. Mom, what'd you talk about at work today? Because one day, like my great-great-grandfather, Josimuch, like my ta'a Annie Harry from Squamish, like my great-great-grandfather Henry George from Tsleil-Waututh, the youngest brother to Chief Dan George. One day my children are going to stand here and they're going to be sharing the exact same stories. My son was set to speak last week at an event. He got all prepared. He's 6 years old and he was getting ready to stand up there. He had his paddle vest on and he had his drum and he was going to go up with his uncle and his brother. And then he's seen all the people in the crowd and he got scared. He said, Mom, I'm not ready. I said, that's okay, son. And when we're doing ceremonial work and artistic practices, we always make sure that we have a backup plan so nothing falls apart. We always have someone to stand in. When we're having singers on a line, if they can't make it, somebody stands in. If we're having a dance, somebody stands in. If I was so sick today, I wouldn't call and say, sorry, I can't make it. I'd say, sorry, I'm sending my cousin, I'm sending my brother, I'm sending my sister. They're going to take my place today and they're going to share the words that I share. Because we come from the same teachings. And that day when my son wasn't able to stand, my daughter got up and said, I'll do it, Mom. So she got up there and she walked with her cousin and her uncle and she sang our song and she wore our regalia. And this is so important. And I just want to really thank you guys for having that open heart and open mind. And a lot of the knowledge that we shared today on the stage, it's transferable to the ancient knowledges that we all come from. Each one of us in this audience today comes from some sort of ancient civilization that lived off the land. And when we talk about following these trendy practices, we transfer them to what we do as an Indigenous people on the land. Like Deborah says, when we're weaving, everyone across the world has some connection to weaving. Tabby, twill, and twine are the different stitches or weavings that we use, and you can find them all across the world. We're all connected through music and poetry, through the drums, through the heartbeat of the earth. So I just wanted to say that our Sinu, our traditional governance, is as equally as important as the policies and the governments, the municipalities and the people that we're dealing with today. So when I was talking about, hey, how are we going to talk about what we're talking about today? Or are you going to stay till the end of the day? I was saying, I have to. We have to make sure everything's taken care of. We have to make sure the work is finished. Because that's why it's all crazy out there. Right? That's why we're all coming back today saying, how can we fix this crazy mess? Creatively. So I could blabber on for days and days because that's how we used to do. We wouldn't cut it, right? We'd be in our big house for like 4 days. Okay, it's 2 a.m. We got 2 more hours to go. So So thank you. Thank you for giving me your hearts and your minds and for sharing the stage and all your reflections on the day. I really appreciate it. And yeah, Vancouver's gonna be the craziest, coolest city. Like, we have the biggest chance to be the most unique city that people wanna come to and be like, oh, they're so green, they're so inclusive, they're so accessible. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you guys. Yeah, it's Epka.
Christy, thank you so much for showing up and showing up again and showing up again and sharing again. I want to be accountable to you as the person that made the decision not to share the slide from this morning's conversation. And I want to be accountable to you for that. And I want to let you know that I apologize and I'm sorry. Excuse me. And I want to let you know that I see you and the continuous reaching out and reaching out and reaching out that you are doing and that your relations are doing. And my gratitude will never be enough. And it is there. Thank you for being with us today. Meta Brown. I would like to invite Meta Brown, a cultural planner and visionary extraordinaire of our time together today, to join us up here and take us through a little bit of what comes next. What comes next after today's symposium? Meta, come on up here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for making it through such a full and such a rich day with us. My name's Meta. I'm one of the cultural planners in the cultural services team, an incredibly dedicated team who's been working alongside us for the past 15 months, along with some really, really brilliant members of our external advisory committee, and with you all, as we've been through this deeply humbling learning process. And as you've seen today, we are making mistakes along the way, and trying to do a better job of holding that policy pen with you, not for you, and know that we have an immense amount of learning still to do. One of the challenges in front of us is now taking all that's been shared over the last 15 months, all that's been shared today, which, as Roop said, could have been shared over 5 days or a week, and trying to think about how we synthesize and prioritize it in ways that will offer us a platform together as partners. In a phased action plan to think about what we can do to support a more equitable, a more accessible, a more intersectional approach to being in relationship with you, and sharing the city's resources to support arts, culture, and creative work in the city. We'll come back out in April with a draft of that plan, and know that we'll need to hand you a whole lot of pens to help us before we go to council in July. Again, we want to say that we're humbled and we're really, really grateful for your patience and your generosity and your brilliant sense of what's possible as we move through this process and try to imagine what it'll look like after July when we work together to realize all of the types of change that you've been challenging us to imagine with you. So thank you. And joining us for more thanks is our Assistant Director, Lara Honrado.
I just wanted to invite everybody to just give one more round of applause for Meta Brown, who probably hasn't slept in days. So it's my honor to just provide more acknowledgement and appreciation, starting with all of you that have been participating today and over the past 18 months who have been so engaged with us. I know today there have been so many rich and deep conversations, and in addition to everyone sharing experiences from their organizations and from their artistic practices, people have also shared some very deeply personal stories as well. So for that, we're very, very grateful. Thank you to all the speakers and moderators. Thank you to the ASL interpreters, Vocal Eye, Visual Description, the childminders, all the facilitators. Again, I will name them: Jocelyn McDougall, Roop Sidhu, and Aslam Bulbulia. Thank you to all the volunteers. Thank you to our graphic recorders. Thank you to Vancouver Civic Theatre staff. Thank you to all of our cultural services staff that have been with us throughout the day. They're all of the other folks here that were present and in dialogue with all of you, and we will continue to learn from everything that has been shared with us so far. All the folks that weren't able to be here today, we know that as much as we tried to make this accessible, that not everybody could participate in this. So we also want to acknowledge that there were lots of folks that would have liked to be here that for various reasons were not able to be in the room, but they are very much still a part of this whole process and very much still a part of the community that we continue to learn from and will continue to learn from. Everyone tuning in on the live stream, hello, thank you for tuning in. We were apparently, the Creative City Strategy hashtag, the one up there, was trending on Twitter earlier, so thank you everyone for sharing that on social media as well. I also want to thank a couple of particular folks, Merja Nawab Tirani, who also contributed so much to bringing this convening together. She's there in the audience, and Kamala Todd as well, who is the moderator for our morning panel. So once again, thank you so much. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. So thank you.
Thanks again, everyone, for coming. Tonight's session will begin at 6:30 p.m. if you'd like to join. Land and Bodies, Reconciliation and Redress in Public Art. So that conversation will be happening here at 6:30 p.m. I just want to say one more time how grateful we are that everyone came to play today. And thanks so much for being part of the conversation. We are building this community together, and I personally am so grateful to be in it with you. So thanks so much.